For 10 years, the man in charge of catching Soviet moles inside West German intelligence was himself exactly that, a Soviet mole. His boss framed the proof on his office wall and showed it off to visitors. This is how it happened. In April 1950, a retired police officer named Heinz Felfe walked into the office of the West German Interior Ministry with an offer. He had intelligence, he said, about Russian recruitment against the Gehlen Organization, West Germany's fledgling spy service, and he had a proposal. Let the West feed controlled disinformation to Moscow, through him, to expose Soviet networks from the inside. Officials saw exactly what they were meant to see. A former Nazi SD lieutenant, hardened by the war, volunteering to help the West catch Russians. What they could not see was that the proposal itself was the operation. Felfe had already been recruited by the KGB. The volunteer act was his cover story. By suggesting the West run a deception against Moscow, Felfe built a preemptive alibi for every future contact he would ever have with Soviet intelligence. If anyone spotted him near a Russian operative, the explanation was already on file. He was running a deception. He was on their side, and it made him look indispensable before he had delivered a single thing. Moscow had chosen him carefully, because Moscow understood something fundamental about West Germany's intelligence landscape. After the war, Western agencies rushed to recruit former Nazi officers, prioritizing anti-communist expertise over security vetting. The Gehlen Organization, founded by former Wehrmacht intelligence chief Reinhard Gehlen with CIA funding, was built on an old boy network of former SD and SS men who vouched for one another. Background checks were treated as bureaucratic inconveniences, and Gehlen himself actively blocked the kind of rigorous vetting that might have caught a penetration agent before he walked through the door. That was the systemic weakness Moscow intended to exploit. And Felfe fit the profile perfectly. A former Nazi intelligence officer with real operational experience, genuine anti-communist credentials on paper, and personal ties to the very network staffing West Germany's secret world. He was, on the surface, exactly the kind of man they were looking for. That was the point. In September 1951, Felfe formally joined the KGB. 2 months later, in November, he was inside the Gehlen Organization. 8 weeks separated his swearing in as a Soviet agent from his first day at his new desk. The old boy network did exactly what it was built to do. Former wartime colleagues recognized one of their own and waved him through. There was a red flag, and it was not a subtle one. Felfe had previously worked for British intelligence after the war and been dismissed for selling information to both sides. This was known. Whether MI6 failed to share it with the Gehlen Organization or Gehlen's people simply ignored it is still disputed. The result was the same. A man already caught playing both sides was welcomed into the West's most sensitive intelligence apparatus without meaningful scrutiny. By 1958, Gehlen had promoted him to the Soviet desk in counter-espionage. Not a peripheral posting, not an administrative role. The Soviet desk. The unit specifically tasked with identifying and catching Soviet moles inside West German intelligence. Felfe now controlled the very machinery designed to find people exactly like himself. And he had earned the promotion. At least, that is what Gehlen believed. Felfe's intelligence production was extraordinary. He delivered secret minutes from the East German Politburo, the kind of material that made careers. And then came his masterpiece. An elaborate, detailed map of Karlshorst, the KGB's headquarters compound in East Berlin. Every building, every entrance. The kind of operational intelligence any Western spy service would have killed to obtain. Gehlen was captivated. He carried copies of the Karlshorst map when he travelled. He displayed it for visitors, pointing out details, basking in what he believed was proof that his organization had penetrated the heart of Soviet operations in Germany. Every intelligence service on Earth uses a technique called chicken feed. You take genuine-looking material, sometimes even real intelligence of limited operational value, and release it through a controlled channel to build that channel's credibility. The Politburo minutes looked authentic because portions of them likely were. The Karlshorst map looked detailed because Moscow wanted it to look detailed. Every piece of intelligence that rose through Felfe's hands and landed on Gehlen's desk had been calibrated to achieve exactly one outcome: promotion. The map hung on Gehlen's wall like a trophy. And in a sense, it was. Just not the kind he imagined, because Felfe was not alone. Kim Philby, the Soviet mole buried deep inside MI6, had overseen the Gehlen case from the British side. Before the Gehlen Organization ever became the BND, it had already been watched from birth by the KGB. George Blake, another mole inside MI6, was betraying joint Anglo-American operations across Europe throughout the 1950s, and inside West German intelligence itself there was Felfe. 3 moles, 3 services, 1 coordinated strategy. According to Soviet intelligence archives, the combined work of Felfe, Philby and Blake allowed the KGB to eliminate the adversary's network of agents in East Germany between 1953 and 1955. Not degrade, not disrupt, eliminate. The human cost was staggering. Western agents inside East Germany were identified one by one, arrested, interrogated. In many cases, executed. Couriers in Leipzig, safe houses in Dresden. Entire networks that had taken years to build were rolled up in months. And Felfe sat at the center of it, not just feeding Moscow secrets, but actively steering the BND's counterintelligence away from the truth. The networks did not collapse because of bad luck. They collapsed because the man responsible for protecting them was the man destroying them. It was not that nobody suspected him. Inside the BND, whispers had circulated for years. Officers who watched their agent networks in the East collapse one after another noticed that the failures clustered around operations crossing Felfe's desk. By autumn 1961, those whispers were loud, but no material evidence existed, and the reason was sitting at the top. Reinhard Gehlen dismissed every warning about Felfe as professional envy. Colleagues raising alarms were not patriots in Gehlen's eyes. They were jealous rivals. He had built this organization from the ruins of West Germany's intelligence apparatus, and he believed he knew his people. The answer came from Warsaw. A Polish intelligence officer named Michał Goleniewski, who had been feeding the CIA for years under a code name, defected in 1961. He did not offer vague suspicions. He named Felfe. He also named George Blake inside MI6 and Harry Houghton of the Portland spy ring. 1 defector, 3 moles, 3 services. What the BND could not do for itself in a decade, a stranger from Warsaw accomplished in a single debrief. In October 1961, West German authorities moved. Felfe was arrested along with 2 accomplices, Hans Clemens and Erwin Tiebel, both former members of the Nazi Reich Security Service, part of the same old boy network that had carried Felfe into the organization in the first place. The circle closed exactly where it had begun. Then came the damage assessment. Between them, Felfe and his accomplices had delivered 15,000 photographs of classified BND files to Soviet agents in East Berlin. 15,000, along with spools of tape recordings. A decade of West German intelligence, the identities of agents, the details of operations, the architecture of the spy catcher's entire apparatus, methodically copied and handed over to the very building on the map that hung on Gehlen's wall. In July 1963, Felfe was found guilty of treason and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. But the verdict answered only the smallest question. The larger question concerned a man who was never charged. Reinhard Gehlen remained president of the BND until 1968, 7 years after Felfe's arrest. 7 years after his organization had been, in the words of intelligence historians, totally compromised. Gehlen had personally championed Felfe. He had promoted him to the Soviet desk. He had dismissed internal warnings. He had blocked the vetting that might have caught the mole years earlier. And yet Gehlen stayed. Felfe served less than half his sentence. In 1969, he was released in an East-West prisoner exchange and traded back across the border. He settled in East Germany and lived quietly until reunification. The spy who rose to run West Germany's spy catchers outlasted the very state that convicted him. The lesson he left behind was not about one man's cunning. It was about the fragility of institutions that substitute personal trust for structural safeguards. Gehlen built his service on the loyalty of men he believed he knew, and the KGB used that belief as a weapon. 15,000 photographs, a decade of betrayal. And at the center of it all, a man who walked through the front door, sat down at the desk designed to catch him, and was never found by the people sitting next to him. He was found by a stranger from Warsaw, carrying a name the BND should have discovered on its own. That is the story of Heinz Felfe, not just the Soviet spy who rose to run West Germany's spy catchers, but the proof that the most dangerous enemy is the one your own system was built to welcome.